Hello, and welcome to Homeowner AF, the Canadian first-time homebuying podcast. I'm Brianna Goslin, mortgage agent level 2, and I work with Canadian first-time homebuyers every single day. If you want to own real estate in Canada but aren't sure how to position yourself to get there, this is the podcast for you. I want to see more young Canadians in the market, building equity and long-term wealth. That starts with getting the right advice at the right time, so you're positioned to act when it matters. Each week, I'll bring you bite-sized episodes that actually move the needle toward homeownership. Short, strategic, and packed with practical tips that you can use right away. I'll cover topics like minimum down payment, closing costs, credit, co-signers, and more. Remember, your finances are like a thumbprint. No two are the same. For advice tailored specifically to you, book your free call at briecallme.com. Now, let's get into it. Hello and welcome to Homeowner AF. Today I am going to talk about debt and how your debt and your debt repayment will affect your mortgage qualification for that first home in Canada. So I'm going to start today with the adage that no debt is best. I recognize that my job is to put you into debt, into probably the largest loan that you will take on in your lifetime. And my goal is to do it in a way that you can repay that loan quite comfortably, happily, and quickly if you have a plan moving forward. So you do really need to know about your own debt that you already have before applying for that first mortgage. And like I said, no debt is best, but some debt is necessary for a lot of young Canadians and not so young Canadians. If you are a first-time homebuyer, just so you know, typical homebuyers who I work with are in their late 20s to their early 40s and beyond. So if you do not fall in that 18 to 25 category, you are still a young homebuyer, first-time homebuyer in my eyes. All right, so some debt is necessary. When a lender is looking at your credit bureau report, they have a whole holistic view of what debt you have taken out, how you're repaying it, and how much you have to repay monthly. So what those minimum monthly payments are. I'm going to review all of your debts, including credit cards, lines of credit, payday loans. We can also include car loans in that and have to include car loans in that, as well as any other liabilities like child support or spousal support. Those are also going to be included there. And if you want just a simple mechanic of how it works, if you want to understand how debt ratios work, and debt ratios is something you are going to hear about quite a bit throughout the mortgage qualification process. It just means how we are measuring your income versus your debts on file. So when we're looking at your debt ratios, if you are making minimum payments to your credit card balances, lines of credit, if you're making that monthly or biweekly car loan payment, any money that you are spending there, say you're putting out $1,500 for all those things, that is $1,500 in mortgage payment that you cannot afford monthly in the eyes of the lender and the Canadian regulations. So we want to make sure that that debt load is as low as possible going into that mortgage qualification. What can we not clear there? Well, if you have a car loan, it is very difficult to pay off that car loan, especially if you've just signed on to it or if it's a large balance, then it makes sense that you do have a car loan, especially if you're commuting back and forth to work. If you're a young Canadian, you often need to drive. And that's fine. What we don't want to see, though, is any new car loans being added to the mortgage application once you are pre-approved, because that will change your entire qualification. It will eat into your home buying budget, and you will have quite a lower maximum purchase price. So you want to make sure that you don't take on any new debts throughout the process. And you will see a podcast episode in the feed that says what not to do once you're pre-approved. And that is one of the big things. Don't take on any more debt. But for the debt that already exists, we also see a lot of student loans. And student loans are pretty typical for people who are purchasing a home. And if you're not able to pay that entire balance, that's okay. If you're a current student and the loan is not in repayment, we will use a 1% of that balance, of that loan balance, as your monthly payment. And if you are in repayment already, if you've graduated or moved on from your program, then we will use whatever your monthly or biweekly payment is there. So in addition to those monthly obligations that you have that we're going to be including in your debt ratios, we're also going to include the house debt for the property that you're purchasing. Now, this includes your mortgage payment, so that principal and interest payment that you're going to make monthly or bi-weekly, as well as the property taxes, so a prorated amount for that property tax that you would pay monthly. We're going to factor in heat, and we're also going to factor in any condo fees or maintenance fees that are associated with the property that you're purchasing. So we put all of those numbers into our algorithm, and then we can see how much mortgage you can actually afford. I have lots of clients who ask me, well, what can I afford if I don't touch any of my debt load, if I don't pay off any of my debts? Now, perhaps you could purchase a home without paying any of your debts. But what I ask my clients when I'm working with them is, why? Why do we want to keep those balances on our credit bureau? Because most times we want to make sure that we have a fresh start, clean credit bureau, and good habits when we are going to sign on to our first mortgage. So if you have any credit trade lines, credit cards, lines of credit that are approaching the maximum balances, then that doesn't bode well for your credit score either. And of course, we want to have the strongest credit score possible so that we can have access to the very best interest rates. Now, crash course on credit. To have a healthy credit score, we want to use the rule of 2. On your credit bureau, you want to have at least 2 trade lines. So that's credit cards or a line of credit. A cell phone bill also qualifies here. And you want to have those 2 trade lines to have a balance or a maximum balance of at least $2,000 or more. So staying with the rule of 2. And you want to have those trade lines in healthy repayment for at least 2 years each. So I'm going to do an entire episode all about credit and credit health, Canadian credit health. But for now, take the rule of 2. If you want to talk about your credit score, of course, book in at www.briecallme.com. But we want to make sure that that credit score is healthy so that we can then qualify for the best rates moving forward. And oftentimes, if somebody's holding quite a bit of debt, that means paying down those trade lines before we go and purchase a new home. So if you do want to keep those trade lines or those balances on your credit bureau, I would ask you, why? Why are we keeping them? And can we work to pay them down before we purchase? Now, I'm recording this podcast episode today because I have seen quite an increase in consumer debt for all of my applicants, not only those trying to break into the market, but also current homeowners, people who are coming up for renewal and want to refinance some of their debt into their mortgage, and they want to increase the cash flow in their household. Once you do hold a mortgage, once you're a homeowner and you're building that equity, you do have the option to consolidate debt. Of course, it should be coupled with a change in behavior modification. So we want to make sure that we're not having those balances inch up incrementally every year to refinance, but that is something that's available to you upon your first renewal once you start building some equity in your home. But for the first-time home buyers, we are seeing an increase in consumer debt. So if you're having trouble keeping that debt under control and at the same time trying to save for your down payment, which I recognize is very difficult and it's slow going right now with inflation the way it is, please book a call at www.briecallme.com, and I can walk you through a plan for paying off that debt in the way that makes most sense for mortgage qualification if that's your goal moving forward. Any questions, of course, please send me a voice note to my Instagram, Brianna Goslin Mortgages, or you can get a hold of me by email at hello@briannagoslinmortgages.com. I look forward to chatting with you, and I'll be in your earbuds next week. Thanks for listening to Homeowner AF, the Canadian first-time home buying podcast. You'll find links to everything I mentioned in today's episode in the show notes, along with details on how to connect with me. I welcome all of your first-time home buying questions. Send me a voice note to have your question featured on air. And if you're ready to talk through specifics for your first home purchase, you can book a free call at breecallme.com. Remember, if home ownership is your goal, you could be closer than you think. You just need the right information to make the right move. I'll be back next week with another tidbit to help you get there.